Once hailed as Britain's most beloved royal couple, Harry and Meghan once made the world believe they were the embodiment of modern love. Bold enough to break tradition, brave enough to live on their own terms. But just a few short years later, that image has crumbled under the weight of relentless controversy. They left the monarchy, accused the media, and openly challenged the very institution that once defined them. And so, from being celebrated as pioneers, Harry and Meghan gradually became a global punchline, doubted, mocked, and branded as traitors to tradition. The question now is, were they victims of Buckingham Palace or architects of their own downfall? Because within the walls of royal power and prestige, no one escapes without a cost. Harry, the prince once seen as a symbol of compassion and freedom, now appears trapped in a cycle of emotional interviews and self-revealing documentaries that exhaust more than they inspire. Meghan, once praised as a feminist icon, is now accused of calculation, turning pain into publicity and vulnerability into currency. But beneath the criticism lies something larger, a deeper struggle between tradition and modernity, between duty and self-expression, between the crown and the individual. Their story isn't just about rebellion against the monarchy, but a confrontation with the world's unshakable expectation of a happily ever after. And when that fairy tale shattered, the world was left wondering, was freedom worth the price of legacy? Now, we're about to uncover what really happened behind the lights, because sometimes the fall of an icon doesn't begin with betrayal from the outside, but with fractures from within. Let's explore that journey to understand how Harry and Meghan became the most divisive couple in modern royal history. When Harry and Meghan first appeared after their 2018 wedding, they were seen as a breath of fresh air through the centuries-old walls of the British monarchy, a rebellious yet compassionate prince, and an independent, biracial actress with intellect and conviction. Together, they inspired hope that the royal family could finally step into the modern era. Meghan represented change. Harry symbolized reborn loyalty. They made people believe that love could bridge all divides, race, class, and the tension between tradition and freedom. But the glow didn't last long. Tearful interviews, claims of racism inside the palace, and their dramatic decision to step back from royal duties turned their golden image into one of chaos and defiance. Commentators began to talk about the Buckingham trap, a subtle mechanism through which Harry and Meghan, in trying to free themselves, ended up losing control of their own narrative. Because the moment they walked away, the freedom they sought became another kind of prison, one built from global scrutiny and suspicion. Some insiders even suggest that Prince William, steadfast in his loyalty to the institution, played a quiet role in pushing his brother into an impossible position, not through confrontation, but through silence, the most powerful weapon the palace possesses. When Harry and Meghan chose to speak out, they faced a system that never needed to shout back, only to control the narrative. The more they tried to prove they were victims, the more they were seen as aggressors against the crown. Worse still, they helped fuel their own downfall. They renounced royal duty but continued to use their titles for commercial gain. They demanded privacy but signed multi-million-dollar media deals to tell their story. The contradictions eroded public trust. What began as a modern fairy tale turned into a media circus, where every word, every tear, felt less like truth and more like performance. From symbols of love and hope, Harry and Meghan have become figures of irony, a bitter ending for two people who dreamed of freedom, yet forgot that freedom requires consistency and respect. What angered the public most isn't just what they have said, but how often their actions contradict their words. Are they naive idealists who lost control, or master strategists hiding behind victimhood? Let's look closer. When Harry and Meghan announced their departure from the royal family in 2020, their reasoning sounded noble: to protect their privacy and build a peaceful life for their children. They said they were exhausted by the tabloids, by headlines that stripped them of their humanity. Yet ironically, from that very moment, they became two of the most talked about people on the planet, not because the press chased them, but because they stepped back into the spotlight by choice. In just 2 years, Harry and Meghan appeared in dozens of high-profile interviews, from Oprah Winfrey and ITV to their explosive Netflix docuseries. They signed a multi-million-dollar deals with Spotify and Netflix and released Spare, a memoir where Harry laid bare everything from palace secrets to private family conflicts and his strained relationship with William. Each time, they insisted, "We just want to tell our story." But the question remains, how much storytelling is enough for people who claim to want privacy? While other royals, particularly William and Kate, have maintained the age-old principle of never complain, never explain, Harry and Meghan took the opposite approach. Reveal everything, explain everything, and cry on camera. Their method of self-narration created a profound sense of contradiction. If peace was truly the goal, why keep revisiting the past with new accusations? If escaping the media was the mission, why turn themselves into global media content? Some analysts argue that privacy for them was never about seclusion, but about control, the right to own their story, to decide when and how to appear. But once that control was tied to contracts, money, and publicity, the idea of privacy turned into a commercial product. They stopped being victims of the press and became its most skilled manipulators. Perhaps that's what made empathy fade. The world no longer saw a wounded couple seeking refuge, but two performers reenacting their trauma for millions, both defending and monetizing their pain. They left the palace to find silence, yet ended up creating the loudest noise of all. And that noise, sadly, hasn't just surrounded them, but also their innocent children. Overexposure hasn't stopped at the adults. It's reached the next generation of Sussexes. Since leaving royal life, Meghan Markle has repeatedly said her biggest goal is to protect her children, Archie and Lilibet, from the media spotlight. She claims she never wanted to repeat the tragedy of Princess Diana, hounded endlessly by paparazzi. But ironically, Meghan herself has been accused of turning her children into part of her personal brand, using their images to fuel her storytelling empire. In the Netflix documentary Harry and Meghan, intimate moments of their children, laughter, first steps, even glimpses inside their Montecito home were broadcast to the world. Meghan called it an authentic family story, but to many viewers, it was proof she was trading her children's privacy for attention and profit. The couple's multi-million-dollar Netflix deal wasn't just about love, it turned their family life into a marketable product. The contradiction became even more striking when Harry and Meghan refused to release official photos of Archie for public milestones, yet freely showcased him in media projects under their control. They didn't want the press to hunt their kids, but they wanted to curate every frame themselves, transforming privacy into a copyrighted brand. Media experts called it a clever PR strategy, but one walking a dangerous tightrope, where the line between protection and exploitation grows thin. Meanwhile, other royals, like William and Kate, have remained firm. Their children appear publicly only during official occasions, never as part of commercial media. Meghan's opposite approach, weaving her children into personal branding. Netflix projects and Archie Foundation content has raised difficult questions. Is this maternal love, or a carefully packaged marketing tactic disguised as family affection? It's not just an ethical issue, it's a question of public trust. When the line between family and business blurs, every gesture is seen through suspicion. People have begun to wonder if motherhood itself can be turned into content. What's left that's real in Harry and Meghan's story? While Meghan faces backlash for commercializing her children, Harry faces another crisis, the slow erosion of his own identity. What happened to the prince the world once adored? There was a time when Prince Harry was the warm, youthful soul of the British monarchy, less rigid than William, more relatable than any royal before him. The image of Harry in uniform, smiling beside his comrades in Afghanistan, or kneeling to hug an orphan, once defined him as the people's prince, brave, kind, and grounded. But since leaving the palace for California, that image has faded. In Montecito, the crown has been replaced by a glass of kombucha, a metaphor for his shift from the world of duty and honor to one of wellness, leisure, and commercial reinvention. Once Hippolyte as one of figure of service, he's now seen as a symbol of self-liberation. Yet that freedom hasn't empowered him. It's unmoored him. Without the royal family's foundation or his military purpose, Harry seems to exist only as Meghan Markle's husband, a supporting role in his own life story. In major projects like the Netflix series, podcasts, and his memoir Spare, Meghan stands at the center of the narrative, while Harry often plays the commentator, reinforcing her story, agreeing or defending. Observers note that his once bright eyes now carry fatigue and doubt. It seems that while Meghan builds an empire, Harry has quietly lost the essence of who he was, the beloved prince who once represented courage and heart. This transformation isn't just environmental, it's existential. In the palace, he was Prince Harry of Wales, part of a living legacy. In California, he's simply Harry, a man trying to prove that leaving the crown didn't mean losing worth. Yet in doing so, he's become increasingly defined by Meghan's image, not his own. The man who once stood for bravery now seems trapped in a cycle of defending decisions he didn't make. The public is slowly realizing a painful truth. The Harry they admired, the sincere, spontaneous, big-hearted prince, feels lost. From a symbol of compassion, he's become a shadow beside a woman who burns brighter, stronger, and far more ambitious. When people began calling him a supporting character in his own life, it wasn't just mockery, it was proof that the distance between the crown and the kombucha had become impossible to bridge. But the tension runs deeper than their personal struggles. It lies in how they've challenged the monarchy itself. Let's look at how that unfolded. From the moment Meghan Markle stepped into the British royal family, she carried a clear ambition to make the monarchy more modern, more open, and more relatable. With her Hollywood background, Meghan believed transparency, strong media presence, and emotional authenticity could help the royals enter a new era. She wanted to change how people saw them, not as distant figures of ritual, but as real human beings capable of emotion, empathy, and advocacy for social justice. But that ambition became the seed of tragedy. In an institution where every glance, every gesture, follows centuries of protocol, any attempt to modernize is easily seen as rebellion. Meghan didn't understand, or perhaps refused to accept, that the British monarchy survives precisely because of its mystery and distance. The palace doesn't operate like a PR firm. It functions like a religion, where silence itself is a symbol of power. Meghan believed in speaking to be understood, while the monarchy believed in staying silent to remain infallible. That fundamental difference made her and Harry outcasts in a system that leaves no room for strong individuality. Their Hollywood approach, open, candid, and performance-driven, clashed violently with the royal way, where everything is decided behind closed doors. When Meghan spoke publicly with conviction and emotion, the contrast became unmistakable. She no longer looked like a duchess. She looked like a celebrity trying to rebrand the monarchy in her own image. And to traditionalists, that was an insult. The conflict deepened when Meghan and Harry announced they were leaving royal life to live freely, yet insisted on keeping their titles as Duke and Duchess of Sussex. They condemned the monarchy as outdated and unfeeling, but continued using their royal status to sign deals, launch brands, and sustain influence. To the palace, this was not just hypocrisy, it was exploitation of the crown for personal gain. In the eyes of royal loyalists, Harry and Meghan weren't just rebels, they were a threat to the very foundation of the institution. Because if anyone can rewrite the royal story to their liking, the monarchy's symbolic power ceases to exist. This wasn't merely a clash between two people in an institution. It was a collision between two eras, one bound by tradition and the other driven by social media, where reputation matters more than restraint. To understand why Meghan's push for modernization failed, we have to look back at the monarchy's unbreakable rules, particularly the letters patent of 1917. During World War I, Britain was facing a surge of anti-monarchist sentiment and criticism of title inflation. King George V sought to slim down the royal household, preserve dignity, and limit the titles of prince and princess only to those directly in line to the throne. According to the 1917 decree, there are three categories of people entitled to royal titles. First, the children of the reigning monarch. Second, the legitimate grandchildren through the male line, meaning sons of royal princes. Third, any exceptional cases granted at the discretion of the sovereign. Beyond lineage, the legitimacy of royal status also depends on formal documentation and baptism under the Church of England, reinforcing both legality and divine order in the monarchy's structure. When those rules are applied to Archie and Lilibet, the situation becomes clearer. By the time they were born, Harry and Meghan had stepped down as working royals and were living in California. Both children were born outside the United Kingdom, had no public christenings, and Archie's birth certificate itself became controversial when Meghan's name was changed from Meghan Markle to Her Royal Highness the Duchess of Sussex. Minor as it may seem, such details give the palace formal grounds to uphold precedent. Royal insiders argue that Buckingham's stance isn't driven by emotion or prejudice, but by principle to preserve the stability of the system. Granting special exceptions to Archie and Lilibet would set a precedent that could open the door for any royal descendant, regardless of duty, to demand titles. In a monarchy built on order and hierarchy, maintaining that boundary is far more vital than appeasing sentiment. For Meghan, this felt like a personal rejection, especially after her accusations of racial bias. But from the palace's perspective, it was simply adherence to King George V's century-old framework, a safeguard to protect the legacy, integrity, and symbolic authority of the British crown. And that seemingly dry royal rule soon became the center of a storm, because it touched something deeply personal: Archie and the controversies surrounding his birth certificate. When Archie Harrison Mountbatten Windsor was born in May 2019, Britain rejoiced at the arrival of a new royal. But the joy didn't last long. It was quickly overshadowed by a small but explosive detail: his birth certificate. The original document listed his mother as Rachel Meghan Markle, a perfectly standard legal entry under British law. Yet, only weeks later, the record was quietly amended. Meghan Markle vanished, replaced by the formal phrase, Her Royal Highness the Duchess of Sussex. That minor change ignited a media frenzy. Palace officials said it was merely an administrative adjustment to align with royal protocol. But few believed it was that simple. One narrative claimed Buckingham Palace wanted to erase Meghan's individual identity, a subtle reminder that she was no longer Meghan Markle, the independent actress, but a subject bound to royal convention. Removing Markle, critics said, symbolized the monarchy's control, a declaration that Meghan now existed only through her title, not as a woman with her own name. But other insiders told a very different story, that it was Meghan herself who requested the change. They claimed she wanted to distance her family from the Markle surname, long associated with her estranged and scandal-prone father. To her, using her royal title in place of her birth name was an act of reinvention, a statement of power, of rewriting identity on her own terms. Whatever the truth, that small alteration carried enormous symbolic weight. It hinted that Archie was a child suspended between two worlds, one royal by blood, and the other free from the institution his parents had rejected. And if Archie's birth certificate caused controversy, the arrival of his sister, Lilibet, pushed the tension to an entirely new level. When Lilibet Diana Mountbatten Windsor was born in June 2021 in California, everything about her birth was unusually quiet. No bells rang from Buckingham Palace. No official announcement came from the royal press office. No traditional photo shoot on the hospital steps to introduce the newest royal baby to the world. A royal child had been born, but no one in the palace acknowledged her as part of the royal family. Unlike her brother, who was born on British soil, Lilibet entered the world across the Atlantic, far from the rituals and traditions of the crown. She wasn't christened by the Church of England, nor was there a public ceremony announcing her name. Even when Harry and Meghan revealed they had named her Lilibet, the cherished nickname Prince Philip once used for Queen Elizabeth II, The royal response was, "Silence, Jerome. No congratulatory statement. No warm gesture. Just silence, layered with meaning." To many, that silence spoke volumes. It was seen as a quiet confirmation that Lilibet wasn't truly recognized as part of the royal lineage. Her name didn't appear immediately on the official line of succession, and no royal customs were performed. The media began to ask, was this Buckingham's subtle way of maintaining order, a polite refusal disguised as protocol, or simply the natural consequence of Harry and Meghan's choice to walk away from the monarchy? From another perspective, that lack of acknowledgement carried deep symbolism. It reflected not only a generational divide within the House of Windsor, but also a widening rift between two worlds, the power of the crown and the freedom of California. And that silence, though invisible, continues to echo, shaping not just their children's future, but the very survival of the Sussex brand. Since stepping back from royal life, Meghan and Harry have worked relentlessly to redefine themselves as the modern royals, blending Hollywood polish with royal prestige. The Sussex brand was built on that foundation, a story of freedom, courage, and defiance against the outdated traditions of the palace. But here lies the paradox. Their entire brand, their fame, their fortune, still depends on the very institution they claim to have escaped, the British monarchy. The major deals with Netflix, Spotify, Penguin Random House, and their high-profile speeches at the United Nations were never just about talent or capability. They existed because they were still Harry and Meghan, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. Their appeal came from being insiders telling the royal story, not from being two ordinary Californians starting over. But when Archie and Lilibet were denied royal titles, that link to the monarchy weakened dramatically. The modern royal narrative Harry and Meghan had built began to lose legitimacy. Without royal titles for their children, their public image shifted. From brave pioneers defying the system, they began to look like people clinging to fading glory. Analysts observed that once royal symbolism loses its power, the Sussex brand inevitably loses its allure. Because in the world of media and soft power, royal heritage is the gold certificate, something Harry and Meghan once possessed, but are now watching slip away. The question now is, can they continue to hold influence when there's no crown left to lean on? Or will their brand of freedom only exist as long as the world remains fascinated by their royal past? Ultimately, Buckingham's action wasn't just a matter of law or protocol. It was a deeply personal blow to Harry, a man who once took pride in his royal bloodline. In the long history of the British monarchy, there has never been a separation as quiet or as painful as the one between Harry and Meghan in Buckingham Palace. What began as a declaration to step back for freedom ended with their erasure from the Windsor lineage, not only on paper, but from the institutional memory of the crown itself. In early 2025, the official royal family website was quietly updated. The names Archie and Lilibet Mountbatten Windsor disappeared from the roster of royal family members. Records relating to their titles, their line of succession, and their security privileges were removed. No photos, no titles, no official mention within the royal structure. The palace issued a short, sterile statement. The update was made to ensure institutional accuracy. The words were administrative, but the message landed like a verdict. For Buckingham, it was a necessary step to protect the monarchy's structure. They believed the distinction between working royals and former members must remain clear to preserve the crown's authority. But for Harry, it was a wound that may never heal. His two children, half Windsor by blood, were now officially cut off from the legacy their grandfather, King Charles III, represents. To the world, they were no longer Archie and Lilibet of the British royal family, but simply two American children, bearing the name Mountbatten Windsor. Growing up under the California sun, analysts have called this a silent purge, the monarchy's decisive move to close the turbulent chapter known as Harry and Meghan. The removal wasn't only ceremonial, it came with real consequences. No titles, no place in the line of succession, no royal security, no role in official events. The privileges tied to royal blood were stripped away layer by layer, coldly, precisely, and irreversibly. Symbolically, it was an act of erasure, a deletion from Windsor history. Every step was calculated to protect the sanctity of the crown, a symbol not just of power, but of continuity, hierarchy, and divine order. By excluding the children born outside the system, the palace was sending a message. The royal legacy cannot be diluted by personal choice or private emotion. Yet behind that decision lies a bitter paradox. The monarchy may have preserved its formality, but it did so at the cost of humanity. And Harry, well, once sworn to serve his country and the crown, has now become an outsider to his own bloodline. He is no longer the rebel prince. He is a father watching his children denied their right to belong. Between the logic of the institution and the heartbreak of a parent, there is only silence, the one language the royal family seems to know best. For the public, this wasn't just a bureaucratic update. It was a deeply personal strike against Harry, nullifying every attempt at reconciliation. From being Britain's most beloved prince, he now stands on the other side of history's wall, where the crown has closed its gates for good. And perhaps, when he looks back, Harry will realize that what he lost wasn't just a title or a role. It was the right to be part of his own family story. As for the royal family, they may have preserved the purity of their heritage, but they did so by crafting a family tragedy history will never forget. From a fairy tale romance to a confrontation with a centuries-old institution, Harry and Meghan's journey has been a collision between personal emotion and the power of tradition. They began with a dream of freedom, to live authentically, beyond the palace walls. But step by step, from leaving royal duty, to airing private conflicts, to commercializing their image and even their children, every move has carried them further away from the Windsor legacy that once made them who they are. 10 parts of this story, 10 slices of a tragedy, from beloved icons to a global punchline, from promises of privacy to a flood of interviews, documentaries, and memoirs, from the desire for respect to an obsession with fame, and finally from Prince and Duchess to two people erased from royal history. The clash between them and Buckingham wasn't just a personal feud. It was a war between tradition and modernity, between duty and freedom, between power and emotion. The greatest lesson this story leaves behind is simple yet brutal. In the world of royalty, emotions may move hearts, but tradition and power decide who gets remembered. Harry and Meghan may have won the media battle, but they lost something sacred, their place within their own bloodline. And perhaps the final question still lingers. Did Harry and Meghan ever truly understand the system they fought against? Or did they underestimate the sheer force of tradition? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Do you believe the palace is protecting its legacy or punishing the couple who defied it? Thank you for watching. Don't forget to check out our previous videos to uncover the warning signs that foreshadowed this royal downfall. And stay with us as we continue to reveal the untold secrets behind the closed doors of the British monarchy. 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 Monarchy.